It's an after-hours edition of the Afternoon Drive. You know, I keep thinking about what James Comey said last night with Anderson Cooper on CNN, and it just doesn't even pass the laugh test.
And from the report, it says that so many basic and fundamental errors were made by three separate handpicked teams on one of the most sensitive FBI investigations that was briefed to the highest levels within the FBI, and that FBI officials expected would eventually be subjected to close scrutiny, raised significant questions regarding the FBI chain of command's management and supervision of the FISA process.
Yeah, that's really concerning.
I mean, it also raises questions about if this happens on the most high-profile thing the FBI is involved with, what happens on lower-level investigations where there's not so much scrutiny?
Yeah, it does. And I can't answer that from this distance, but it's going to have to be looked at. He didn't conclude that the errors made any difference in the ultimate result, in the validity of the applications, but that doesn't matter. It still has to be taken seriously.
He basically didn't weigh in on that at all. Do you think that those errors made a difference?
I can't tell. I mean,
James Comey is one of the orchestrators and the designers of a coup that was designed to take down the president. Now, sadly, we know what the lying legacy corporate corrupt mainstream media is going to say about all this. Why, it's now been debunked because, after all, the Inspector General's report says no political bias. So you know where we have to go to find the commentary, the insight into this? And it's not conservative radio. No, nay. It's not the conservative media. No, nay. We go to the underground, left-wing, progressive media. Now, Jimmy Dore got his start really with the Young Turks. You know what I think of Cenk Uygur and the Young Turks. But Jimmy Dore, I will say this. Though he is a leftist, a progressive, and he is totally committed to that ideology, I will give him this. He called BS on the entire Russian collusion narrative that was being perpetrated in the media for nearly 3 years. He's called BS on this entire Ukraine impeachment inquiry witch hunt, and he's now calling BS on the IG report. I'm going to show you a few minutes, actually several minutes, of a clip from Jimmy Dore's YouTube channel. And again, you and I would not agree with Jimmy Dore on his political ideology, but I'll say this. I will give him a thumbs up that though he is not a Trump guy, does not like Donald Trump, does not like the policies of Donald Trump, I have to say this. He is actually for the truth. He is anti-propaganda, and he is calling, for lack of a better way of saying it, BS where there's BS. Now, let me say to some of my viewers that you might be a little bit offended by some of the words that Jimmy Dore uses, but I promise you, what he has to say here, it's spot on, it is accurate analysis, and this is coming from the left, which gives me hope that the average American watching this does get it.
Now there's this the Inspector General has been looking into how did this Russiagate investigation get started? And did it get started on false premises at the FBI? Meaning what? Meaning the Inspector General was trying to figure out, was this a hit job? Does the FBI go out of bounds? Did they overreach their constitutional authority and act like unelected arbiters of how our election should go? Yes, they did. But that's the question, right? So here it is. This is from the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Justice. It says the review of 4 FISA applications and other aspects of the FBI's Crossfire hurricane investigation. Now, the whole Russia thing's based on these FISA applications, meaning they go into a secret court, which no one gets to hear what happens, and you don't get to present a defense, nothing like that. It's just the FBI goes in and meets with the judge, and they go, look, this is all the evidence, and we say it's true. And the judge goes, well, if that's true, go ahead. You can tap everybody's phone in the White House. That's what a FISA warrant is. And you can read every email and listen to every phone call. That's what a FISA warrant is. And And so the whole point of it, they're looking into, well, was it on the up and up? Did they lie to the FISA court? Oh, by the way, so the Inspector General's report comes out, and it exonerates the FBI. Their conclusion is, though they had a lot of problems with the FBI's investigation and the way they got their FISA warrants, they say still the FBI didn't do anything that wrong. Their conclusion, it's still okay. That was their conclusion. And so when you go to Huffington Post, this is their headline. Why wouldn't it be the headline from the Inspector General? I mean, it exonerates the FBI in any wrongdoing. Trump is wrong. Why wouldn't that be your headline? Why wouldn't that be your headline? Instead, it's a bullshit headline about GOP and tantrums. That's not a story. That's not a substantive news story. Why? Well, here you have to go down the page, their front page. You have to go down all the way to almost the bottom, and you see here's the story. It says Department of Justice watchdog finds FBI justified in opening Trump probe, comma, but sees problems with FISA applications. That's the whole crux of the goddamn FBI investigation. And that's why it's not the headline. That's why it's not the headline. That's why. And if you go to the article on this at the Huffington Post, it says there's no evidence that the FBI's decision to open an investigation into the Trump campaign's connections to Russia in 2016 was influenced by political bias, according to a Justice Department Inspector General's report released Monday that largely debunked President Donald Trump's conspiracy theories about the origins of the Russia probe. So now I immediately distrust the writer of this article. So now conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist is just a term used against someone who you don't agree with politically. Because the Democrats' idea of what happened in Ukraine is also a conspiracy theory. Russiagate is a conspiracy theory, but they never call it that. Why? Because they're the establishment. And the guy who wrote this for the Huffington Post is a watchdog of the establishment. And that's why he'll never say the Democrats are pushing a conspiracy theory or the establishment is, but he'll say Trump is. Even though Russiagate was a 3-year conspiracy theory, they switched the word and called it collusion, so that you couldn't call them conspiracies. Do you see how they do it? And then they all do it. So I don't want to believe a damn thing this guy says in this Huffington Post article, because why do you got to do that? I know why you got to do that, because you're pushing propaganda. That's why. Why else would you do that? Why wouldn't you say, which debunks or contradicts President Donald Trump's assertion about, why wouldn't you just say his assertion? That's the way a news person would write that. This is the way a propagandist would write that. Well done. And then at the bottom it says, but the report said FBI attorneys failed to properly vet applications to monitor the communications of former campaign official Carter Page. Well, that's kind of the key thing. And the Huffington Post reports it as it's nothing. Which is why it's not on the front, which is why it's not the headline on their front page. And why they have to do propaganda in the middle of the article. What's the first paragraph? So let's break down what the IG report actually says. Michael Tracy tweeted this out. Now, it's a 400-page report. Let's find out what's in it. Michael Tracy says, the IG report says that Carter Page FISA request drew almost entirely from the Steele dossier to establish probable cause that Page was facilitating a well-developed conspiracy between Russia and Trump. This was such an enormous fraud. So I'm going to break that down for you. The IG report says the Carter Page FISA request drew, so Carter Page, Papadopoulos, two tangentially barely connected with the Trump administration campaign, they go and work these guys and get a FISA warrant through these guys. And here's what it says. So, by the way, the Steele, it says it was based on the Steele dossier, which has been discredited. Do you know what the Steele dossier was? The Steele dossier was Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party paying a spy, a foreign spy, this guy Steele, to dig up dirt on Trump. And where did he go to dig dirt up? He went to Russia. Steele conspired with people in Russia to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. And who was paying him to do it? Hillary Clinton was. That's the Steele dossier, just so you know. That's the Steele. That's the P. That's where they claimed Trump got peed on. No, totally just made up. Totally made up. And here it is from the report. I'll read it. It's the first line. I read you this is from the IG report, and I'll read you the first line. The first line says the FISA request form drew almost entirely from Steele's reporting in describing the factual basis to establish probable cause to believe that Page was an agent of a foreign power. So all that's what made the judge go, whoa, this guy's working with Russia and he's an agent of Russia and he's working with Trump. We better put a phone tap on the Trump administration. And it turns out that that request, that's all bullshit. The Steele dossier is bullshit. And so them doing that compromises the whole thing. In fact, what Michael Steele says is there was clearly zero legitimate basis for a FISA warrant on Carter Page, which totally negates a core tenet of the entire Russia investigation. But the media is screaming that the FBI was somehow gloriously vindicated. And they weren't. The FBI using outright fabrications and omitting key countervailing facts to obtain a FISA warrant on a U.S. citizen. So the FBI goes to the FISA court, they give them false information, and then leave out the real information that would be exculpatory. That's what your FBI is doing. That's what they did. They went to the FISA court and lied. They used a phony BS opposition research, and they held back the part of it that would have actually hurt their case. I'll read it again. FBI using outright fabrications and omitting key countervailing facts to obtain a FISA warrant on a U.S. citizen, maybe the most invasive form of surveillance available to the U.S. government, is a gigantic civil liberties scandal, but expect most media to ignore and downplay this, which is exactly what I showed you the Huffington Post is doing. FBI official told the inspector general, get this, FBI official told the inspector general that the Steele dossier, he would not have thought they could establish probable cause without the Steele dossier. So without the Steele dossier, this thing that's completely debunked, was paid for by Hillary Clinton, was gotten by a foreign spy who paid for information from people inside Russia and the Kremlin, according to him. So they got dirt on Donald Trump, the exact thing Hillary Clinton is accusing Donald Trump's campaign of doing. Getting dirt from the Russians to use against her in a campaign. It's exactly what she actually did. Isn't that interesting? I've reported that here before. And so we've been told for years that the centrality of the Steele dossier to the Russia investigation was a GOP conspiracy theory. We've been told for years that the centrality of the Steele dossier to the Russia investigation was a GOP conspiracy theory. Turns out it's not. It's 100% fact. The Inspector General report explicitly faults FBI for never disclosing in multiple FISA applications that Christopher Steele was desperate that Trump not get elected and passionate about him not being the U.S. president. But journalists are celebrating that the FBI was cleared of all political bias. So they didn't tell any of that stuff. So they just went and they hoodwinked a FISA judge, is what the FBI did. And this is revealing that. The Inspector General admits it, but he still concludes somehow the FBI's investigation wasn't bullshit. Isn't that interesting? It's strange how snarky and Kool-Aid journalists are focusing on how this IG report supposedly undermines QAnon, as if crackpot internet trolls are the paramount issue here, instead of enormous civil liberties violations at the high. So what journalists are doing is like, see, you guys are all nuts about QAnon. That's not what anybody's talking about. We're talking about the massive, enormous civil liberties violations and the lying by the FBI and the inherent corruption of the FISA court.
Yeah, I mean, what we should be talking about is, okay, if they can follow this process for somebody who is the president of the United States, a very powerful position, what kind of process could they follow for just a general person?
Right?
How easily could they get exactly what they want for any given person on the planet?
Oh, wow, Ron. That's a scary thought. Like if they want to, like, let's say I somehow stumbled onto a piece of information that was going to blow open a story about an illegal war. Let's say someone sent me something or stumbled on. They got to shut us down. Mm-hmm. They've already tried to discredit us. They've already paying people to write smear articles. The government is paying people to write smear articles on us. So, which means we're over the target, right? They wouldn't not do that. They wouldn't do that if we were fucking idiots and we didn't know what was happening. We weren't over the target. That's what that's saying. You catch a lot of flack when you're over the target. And so, if they can, what Ron is saying, if they can do this to a president to get a tap on all their phones, every email, imagine what they could do to you. Imagine.
Yeah.
People will point to this. I want to show you this. This is also in the report, which doesn't make sense. So remember in the report, it says we relied almost exclusively on this dossier to get the Carter Page FISA warrant, which is, as he points out, was a key tenet of the Russia investigation. But here, the report, the Inspector General concludes, it says 485. It says, we determined that the election reporting from Christopher Steele played no role in the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. What? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense, which is why Durham and Barr reject the Justice Department's Inspector General findings that tend to clear the FBI in the Trump-Russia probe. So this is Durham. So this is a story from the Hartford Courant. It says Connecticut U.S. Attorney John H. Durham, who is leading the Justice Department's criminal investigation of how the FBI opened a Russia collusion case against President Donald J. Trump's 2016 campaign, disputed the central conclusion of the long-awaited Inspector General report Monday that the Bureau was justified in opening the probe. So people have a lot of problems with Barr, right? They say how compromised, but I haven't heard people say this about Durham yet. Maybe they are. But he just got bipartisan agreement to become U.S. Attorney. Based on the evidence collected to date, and while our investigation is ongoing, last month we advised the Inspector General that we do not agree with some of the report's conclusions as to predication and how the FBI case was opened, Durham said. Now, this is a big deal for Durham to say that because Durham rarely speaks publicly about anything. And his statement Monday about an active investigation was highly unusual for him. So why did he do it? Well, a source said he was responding in part to a news account from Washington a week ago that said he believes mistakenly reported that he knew of no evidence that could contradict Horowitz's conclusion. That's the Inspector General.
In other words, somebody said, hey, Durham's cool with all this, by
Yes.
the way. And he was like, whoa, wait, no.
So it was being reported, he's in the news, that Durham is cool with the Inspector General's report and their conclusions. That's being reported. And he's like, that's not correct. That's why I'm coming out today to say no. Do not agree with the conclusions. There it is. We do not agree. So also, Attorney General Barr said the Inspector General's report now makes clear that the FBI launched an intrusive investigation of a U.S. presidential campaign on the thinnest of suspicions that, in my view, were insufficient to justify the steps taken. It is also clear that from its inception, the evidence produced by the investigation was consistently exculpatory. So he's saying when they were investigating Russiagate, what they kept finding was information that actually exonerated the president. That's consistently exculpatory. That's what that means, right, Professor? So, nevertheless, the investigation and surveillance was pushed forward for the duration of the campaign and deep into President Trump's administration. Barr was particularly critical of repeated FBI applications made to the FISA court for 4 warrants targeting Trump campaign volunteer Carter Page, a U.S. Naval Academy graduate who interacted frequently with Russians as an energy consultant. In the rush to obtain and maintain FISA surveillance of Trump campaign associates, FBI officials misled the FISA court, omitted critical exculpatory facts from their filings, and suppressed or ignored information negating the reliability of their principal source. So what he's saying is, and we all knew that's how, I'm sure they do that with every FISA case. It's just now we have an attorney general looking into it. Because remember, the FISA stuff's all secret. Trump had to declassify the FISA court hearing stuff so that they could look at it. So I'm pretty sure it's pretty well known. I know, and Bill Binney knows it, that the FBI lies to the FISA court on the regular. And so the fact that the FBI officials misled the FISA court to get a surveillance wiretap on the Trump campaign is not surprising at all. That's what they do. And of course, when they investigated, they found out that they did that. And they also found out, even worse, they kept back information that contradicted them. The Inspector General found that the explanations given for these actions unsatisfactory. So even the Inspector General's report said that the explanations given for those actions around the FISA court were unsatisfactory. Yet the Inspector General still concluded the FBI was A-OK. It was still okay. While most of the misconduct identified by the Inspector General was committed in 2016 and 2017 by a small group of now former FBI officials, the malfeasance and misfeasance, that's two different words?
2 different feasance, man.
Wow. Detailed in the Inspector General report reflects a clear abuse of the FISA process. Now, we told you, I don't know but that's just a matter of case. When Bill Binney came on the show, he explained how this works. And I expected them to find way worse stuff. Well, they found it that they lied. I don't know. Does it get worse than that? The FBI's lying and they're misleading the FISA court. Why is that so bad? Because there's no adversarial process at the FISA court. That's why. You don't get to send your lawyer to say this guy's full of shit and that's not right. They don't, none of that. They just hear from the government. Okay, so that's it. And Durham, so there you go. So now you know the rest of the story.
A shout out and props to Jimmy Dore. Thank you for telling the truth. Hey, this has been Pastor Marty with the Afternoon Drive. Give us a thumbs up and a like. Make sure you spread this video anywhere and everywhere that you can, because we know YouTube is doing everything they can to shut us down and get rid of us. Don't let it happen.